Okay. Yeah.
Hello. Who are you? Yeah, I'll be good. Well, I'm not an official speaker, but I came to support the speaker. Hi.
Crystal, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good. Don't have a sign?
I actually, on my way here, I haven't, okay, so I just put it up today, new sign. And I put the, you call it, the tracker in it. And within an hour, it was moved to one. I just drove past the house on my way here and I kind of like, tried to look to see if maybe someone just ditched it, but I don't see it like visibly. It's right up the corner of Lovery and Summer Street. Oh. The driveway's on Lovery. Are you gonna go? Yeah, I'm gonna, I figured I wanted to come here and then. And then, let's see if it's still there.
Alrighty.
Now it's moved again.
It's on the march.
It's on the march. Alrighty. Let's see. Sound going here.
Rabbit, back and I think.
I think I'm gonna leave this, since do you know for sure they're coming from the MTA to speak?
Oh, yes,
Okay,
absolutely. Gonna show you.
all right, I'm gonna go then, because now I wanna chase my sign around.
Oh, yeah, okay.
The police, and I'll
Oh,
leave that.
but be careful.
No, I'm gonna go to the police, but this is too exciting for me, because this is my third sign. And like, it just burns me.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
This is
that's an expenditure.
$21 in signs, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's not even the point, but yeah, like,
Yeah,
and
but
also my freedom of speech. And
Yeah.
all this, good. But yeah. How do you get a tracker? I just ordered it on Amazon. It's just a tiny little circle. It's called Apple. A little bit thick. I have to slide it inside. It's hard. I was afraid it would be obvious, but.
So Susan McAllis from the Westboro DTC, it looks like, right?
Yes, correct.
Oh, fantastic. Could you give me just say a few words, like,
well-
1, 2, 3. I'm doing a sound check here in the room and lucky
Okay.
you to help me. So,
I am the co-chair of the Westboro DTC and a DSC member as well. I hold the caucus seat in 2nd Worcester.
excellent. That is wonderful. Thank you very much. You have helped me prove out that the in-room screen works and the volume is right. So thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
Now, let's see, is John Rappaport in your group? Is he that?
Yes, he is.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Anna, how are you?
Well, and you?
I'm well. Where are you from?
Westboro.
Oh, all right. So word spread, huh? Excellent.
They have
Excellent.
powerful emails.
Excellent. That's great. Because the emails I send out get like, crickets when I no response, So we're just getting ourselves organized. There's only a couple of us here in the room in Medway. You are the first couple to join by Zoom, but I expect the traffic will pick up. The kind of order of march is we're just going to go through the questions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, and then against on each question. There'll be, somewhere between 10 and 20 minutes of conversation, pro and con on each question, and then we are going to adjourn. And then we're going to pick up with our regular Medway DTC meeting. So you're welcome to hang in there as long as you want. it's almost certain you'll be out of here by about 10 minutes to 9. So settle in. And meanwhile, if you don't mind, I'm just gonna put y'all on mute and we will go on from there.
Over here, okay for the water?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. All right. So. All right. So Laura Connolly, it looks like you're joining us. Are you able to speak here? Oh, maybe still connecting. All right. No, looking for business actions. All right, well, going better than I thought. Sue and Colin Cass. Stalwarts. Doing great.
It's horrifying. There are reasons why robots will not rule the world. That's it, that's it. They don't know the difference between pilots and pilots. Yeah. Good. How'd you like the thing last night? I was glad that we got it. Yeah. It didn't really give me any new information.
Get rid of my picture.
It was pretty, I want to get rid of some of it. And I was like,
All right, let's go back here.
I think, unfortunately, I think we have to use, we may have to use the speakers here. I'm not sure. Over here now.
Hello, Martin Young, join us.
Yes,
All right, where are you from?
Shrewsbury.
Wow.
Yeah.
How are-
I found out about it from our friend Jonathan Rappaport, who's here with us.
You Westboro folks are effective communicators, I gotta tell you. Thanks for
We
joining.
tried.
There are now officially more people not from Medway than from Medway on this Medway DTC call, so thank you.
Thank you for doing this.
Well, you know, we're actually, I don't know if we're ahead or behind or in the middle or whatever, but for what it's worth, if any of you listens to the Egan and Browdy show and Boston Public Radio on WGBH radio, they are doing one a day next week on the ballot question. So, and an extended debate, I think, on each one. So if you're really interested, you know, a free plug for Egan and Browdy on, GBH radio. You know, come for the debate and stay for the other stuff that they do. Hang in there, folks. We're still kind of gathering and getting organized here, so. All righty. Martin, if you want to go on mute, feel free. He needs to do stuff. Right?
You want to broadcast it through the TV?
No, I want to broadcast it through here.
Well, yeah, the way the original wanted it.
I don't know why it's not working.
They said, no, it won't work. They have it. Yeah, I don't know. Hey, you know what?
They weren't.
You heard the, ballot questions, yes? Excellent. You could just sign in, that'd be great.
That an app was needed to use this device.
Yeah, and it always says that.
Medway or somewhere nearby? Yeah. Oh, okay.
Oh, it's not working for some reason. I have this issue happen with this one previous time. So I'll have to listen to it through here, which is less than I.
I'm sure you mute.
I know.
West Road. And I would encourage you all to sit closer in than farther away.
All right. Yeah. All right.
Yes.
It's the Franklin, Town Council meeting.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Big issues, huh?
well, I don't know, I can't, it's on the agenda. So I don't know if there's anything that we want to try to get down there. So,
Maybe we shouldn't be sitting up front.
no, that's what I was.
Oh, no, I don't think we'll have that many folks in the room. I think a lot of folks will join by Zoom. I think nearly all the speakers will be joining by Zoom. So come and go as you need. Right.
Whenever you want. You know, usually. Yeah, like mine. No, I'm not. Snacks, water available to people. Yeah. Briefly, because she put up her sign. And went back in, got dressed to come out there, and I went back out the sign. Fine. Think she's. But. Putting paper on it. And it goes to 160,000 opportunity.
Oh,
And
you're not like, I'm
no,
going to go around and
no,
go.
no, and then she said, I said, so maybe I'll go, maybe the police can do that. And so she got to the, and she was so, it's there, it's on the reference. He hasn't taken it out of his time.
David, sorry for the confusion about your address in the MailChimp. It's incorrect. It really is.
Okay.
I did a fat finger thing. I'm telling you what it looked like. So
In the interim, you may want to just
I told her to record it.
forward me an extra copy of the email, figure out why, when we figure out why I'm not getting emails or something. I went to do a search and couldn't find anything in any of my mail folders all the way back to January where MailChimp was taking authority over me. I don't know what's up with that. We're about-
Yeah.
we're from maybe my, business.
Just send it to you.
She lives on summer. I see the menu, but yeah, a bunch of them, all the side order. Yeah, it goes. Yeah.
Well, don't you have a copy problem? Yeah, well. Why is that? So, it should still.
And she's like, hey, and they're wet.
All right. I see Bill and Helen Panis have joined the call. Bill and Helen, where are you from? I will unmute. What is it?
Okay, we're here. Bill and Helen Panis from Westboro.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining. You Westboroughs are a strong and cohesive bunch.
I mean, they're really cool. One of, I mean, one of them has.
Hello, Pablo Ruiz. Glad you could join us.
Hello, good evening, everybody.
All right, so Pablo, you're a little bit early, but you're welcome to hang in, listen to the presentations as they go by. Question 3 is kind of halfway through our program, so sit tight, we'll get to you.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it.
All right, folks, we're just about ready to start, so grab a seat. I see Suzanne Bump has joined. Suzanne, good to see you.
Hi, good to see you too. Thank you.
All righty, and Jamie Belcito has just joined, it looks like, as well, or is in the process, so there she is. All righty. So we're just about ready to get underway. And Jamie, I know you're under a little bit of time pressure, and Suzanne, so are you. So lucky you. Question 1 is the first thing we do tonight.
Hi, Auditor.
Good. How are
Hello,
you?
Madam Auditor. Nice to see you. It's been too long.
Good to
and
see
thank
you. I know. Oh, that's fine. I'm happy to be doing this. This is great.
All
Are you
right.
in a car as well?
Oh my gosh, I call it the mobile office. Yes, I am.
Oh,
But you're
man.
not driving, are you? You're not
I am
driving.
not. I am
Okay,
not.
neither am I. Neither am
Exactly.
I.
Yeah.
God.
Yep. And just so everybody knows, This meeting is being recorded for
Yeah.
posterity and for us to send around to our friends and neighbors here so that we can treasure your words of wisdom for us on these questions.
Great.
We have a very geographically mixed audience tonight, by the way. We've got folks from Shrewsbury, Westboro, Franklin, Medway, and who knows who else is going to show up. Word has spread about this event, so
Oh,
I'm very pleased, but a little intimidated here. A lot of new folks here. But without further ado, we're going to get underway with an explication for and against question 1, which I will summarize as is in the Secretary of State's booklet. This proposed law would specify that the state auditor has the authority to audit the legislature. So up first is Jamie Belcito, former state rep for the 4th Essex District. And then she'll be followed up by Suzanne Bump, former state auditor. So Jamie, take it away.
Sure. And I, again, am very thankful, Larry, for having, I'm sorry, is it Larry or Lawrence? I don't want to call you.
Larry's fine.
Okay, great. And to the good people of Medway and my 495, West 495 folks here, thank you for having me. And I will also say I'm very, very honored to be on a call with the former auditor, whom I enjoy very much. So I am speaking on behalf of voting yes on 1. I will disclose that I am colleagues, work friends with the current auditor, but I'm looking at this from a much different standpoint. I'm looking at this as someone who, it is a former rep, and I would support this even if I was a rep, because I do believe in how I'm interpreting this and in the most transparency possible in all facets of our government. I have the privilege and honor to be a trained facilitator at the National Institute of Civil Discourse, which was founded by former Governor Christy Todd Whitman and Majority Leader Tom Daschle. And so I work a lot with different legislatures around the country in a bipartisan, bicameral manner. And I know right now 23 states do have auditing authority for the legislature, not specifically for the legislature, but inclusive of. And the auditor's position is one that has a full depth and breadth of abilities to audit really anything, any commission, any committee, best as I know. And of course, we have the expert who will speak next as to how things can be managed and potentially be even brought to a better quality of output for any matter in the Commonwealth. One of my favorites that the auditor performed was an overview of our regional school system, of which I used to represent 4 high schools. So it really does show you that you can audit the way our judicial processes are managed, through how WIC is applied to our healthcare system, to our different committees and commissions in the Commonwealth, et cetera. And I do want to say, also coming from a private business background, back in the days of when there used to be like the 6 big auditing firms, now it's PricewaterhouseCoopers, Deloitte. I don't even know if it's Deloitte and Touche anymore. It used to be Coopers and Lybrand and all of this. That these are folks that would come in to Time Warner, when I worked at Time Warner, and do a full audit on how processes were being managed. I myself used to do the I-9 audits, which are the employment authorization forms, and just making sure that there is recommendations made on how to be more efficient. So financial evaluations, performance audits, compliance audits, identifying inefficiencies and suggest improvements. So whether or not I'm a legislator or as I like to say, none of us are here for the long haul. I would like to see that there be as much transparency in any part of our government going forward. So I am speaking in support of it. And I'm very thankful for the opportunity to speak to it. Again, you have me who feels educated on the issue and can speak to why I support it, and then you have the actual former auditor who will give her feedback on this. But I do see that also, as far as my constituency is concerned, I come from a purple district. Folks want to see this, so I can say from what I've heard from independents to Republicans to Democrats, it seems to be something folks want. So I think we saw that with the initiative getting on the ballot. And I'm here if there's any questions. And if I don't have the answer, we'll get you the answer, Larry, and make sure your committee has that information.
Okay, sounds good. I'll ask in the room, does anybody have a question for Jamie on this topic? Stephen, go ahead.
What exactly is
Yeah, Jamie, did you hear that? The question is, what exactly will be audited?
Well, I don't think that there is a slate to be audited at this point. I think there's been a lot of personal back and forth on some of the conversations have been on committees, who is appointed to committees legislatively, why they're appointed, how many, just even for instance, there's been a discussion on how many women have been appointed to committees. I know I was one of I was the 220th woman elected to the state legislature out of 22,000 men over the duration of a history of our legislature. But if there's only, say, 26% of the legislature are women and they're all being appointed to different committees, does that mean that women are being put on more committees than their male counterparts? Just things like this. I think there's an opportunity to look at. This is a personal favorite of mine. I say tongue in cheek because I'm not pointing fingers, but more of an observation, because I do a lot of work at the federal Congress, is why there would be need for a marathon end of the session when there's so many months to lead up to being able to hear bills and vote on them. And maybe that's just recommendations. Hey, here's some timelines. Here's how you can here's what your filing timeline is, which then based on other states, you could hear your bills in committee during this time and then move to have committee working at this time. Just more of a seeing what other states are doing and making recommendations on how to be more expeditious and more efficient in how the legislature is managed.
Okay, any other questions in the room? No, how about folks on Zoom? Unmute yourself and pipe in if you want. No? All right, so I have a question for you, Jamie. It seems to me that there's maybe not an inclination, but the opportunity and maybe the fear that this is an expedition to find embarrassing or otherwise provocative material, information or about functions within the legislature. How does, I guess, privacy or the confidentiality of the actions of the legislators, how is that preserved in the face of an audit like this?
Well, I do appreciate what you're saying. And again, I'm coming at this issue from as least of a personal perspective as I can, because I do see that there's been a lot of personalities and personal politics at play with this. I don't foresee that one individual would be able to come into the office of the auditor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and make it a personal decision on how and what is going to be chosen for an audit just for personal gain. I think that there is already precedent made on how the legislature has been audited previously, and I would think that that precedent would be followed, as opposed to, something that we've seen kind of play out that hasn't seemed like it's been for the good of the Commonwealth, but maybe more of a insider's issue.
Okay, we have one more question in the room. Sue?
Potential to improve the transparency of the voting records of the legislature.
The question is, does an audit like this have maybe as a goal or a desired outcome, improving the transparency of the operation of the legislature, particularly voting records of the members? Is that kind of how I got it, Sue?
Oh, so Larry, I'm so
Uh,
sorry. I didn't realize that it was like you have some in person and some on
Oh yeah, no, it's a real mixed bag. It's okay, Jamie. I'm pretty good at translating, so.
So hello, friends in the room. Sure, and you know that particular scenario has been brought up, and so is there an ability to take a look? I think that would be something that again, take out the personalities. If the Commonwealth, and again, I come at this from looking at other legislatures, if the Commonwealth does practice it has a particular practice around the way their committees are formulated and how those votes are had, the recommendation could be, let's take a look at making this more transparent. And so I would say that scenario that was just identified would fall into that bucket. And again, Madam Auditor, who's on the line here, would have a much clearer idea, having been the auditor, for there to be an understanding of how those processes, if there's intention for a new audit, how is that managed, and how is the blueprint charted out for that? Because it sounds to me that we already have blueprint for the legislature being audited. The current auditor has already shown that there has been precedent with more than several cases. And again, I don't have the specific knowledge to engage on how a brand new audit would be brought to life, but it would give the opportunity for something like that to happen.
Okay, great. Jamie, I think we've come to the end of the 10 or so minutes that we allocated to you. Hope you
Thank
don't
you.
mind. We're going to move on. Suzanne Baum, why don't you give us the against view on question 1?
Well, thank you, Larry, and to everybody who's taking the time to actually engage in this conversation and become more educated about not just this, but all of the ballot questions. I wish that more people around the Commonwealth were doing so. At any rate, yes, indeed. So I'm opposed to this, not because it is inherently a bad idea. In fact, it is an idea that I proposed when I first ran for office. But the way that the incumbent auditor wants to conduct these audits is different from the way I conceived of it, and raises issues that involve the Constitution, and also conformance with government auditing standards, which the auditor is obligated to follow. So let me tell you what I mean by that. And I truly do hate to be involving personalities in this conversation, and because I've always prided myself on my ability to separate out personalities from principles in making public policy decisions. But unfortunately, in this case, they are inseparable. First, let me just clarify a couple of points that Jamie made. Yes, indeed, the auditor in the past had audited the legislature. That is, I would say, though, in the very distant past. And it was when the auditor's office had a different role in state government. In the past, it was indeed the auditor who audited the books of the Commonwealth. The auditor no longer does that. The auditor does not do financial auditing here in the 21st century. Actually stopped doing it I think back in the 50s, when state government was reorganized and the authority for auditing the books, the financial records of the Commonwealth, was given to the state comptroller. So for those of you who think that it would be a great idea to see how the legislature is spending its money, you look to the comptroller's reports, not the state auditor's reports. What we do now in the auditor's office and have been doing for past several decades is what's called performance auditing. And in performance auditing, you are looking at how effectively an agency is complying, first of all, with its mandate, what it is that the legislature has charged the agency with doing. And you look at whether it is complying with the rules that have been set forth for how that job is to be done. So when you're doing performance auditing, you audit against objective standards. Is this agency that's supposed to be taking care of children, in fact, taking care of children, or is it, doing beach cleanup work? I mean, which is a foolish example, but but that's what you look at. Is the agency meeting the mission? Is it doing what the legislature tasked it with doing? And then are they following the rules? So then if it's a matter of tracking overtime properly, or preserving precious resources of the Commonwealth, is it putting contracts out to bid? Is it checking on sex offender status, which may be one of his tasks? So is it meeting its mission, and is it following the rules in doing so? And a corollary to that is, and can you do it? Can you do it better? But again, against objective standards. Objective standards have to be established. We have to have verifiable evidence that we can test and use in our analyses. And then you have you make fact-based conclusions. The problem with the proposal as the current auditor wants to use the power is to inject into this fact-based objective analysis subjectivity and opinion. The legislature, unlike other state agencies, and I appreciate that this is contentious and problematic for a lot of people, the legislature gets to decide for itself what the rules are that it's going to follow. And true, it does exempt itself from a number of obligations that it imposes upon other state agencies or state activities. And so, for instance, the public records law, the open meeting law. There are indeed things that they do that don't conform with standards that they set for other agencies. But if you're looking at that as an auditor, you have no right as an auditor auditing according to government auditing standards, which the auditor's office is obligated to follow, to substitute your own judgment. You have to have, as I said, you have to have objective standards, and opinion has no place in the audit, and in the audit process. And so the proposal, as she is envisioning it, and intending to use this power, runs afoul of government auditing standards. They're also, because it gets into these areas, which speaks to the discretionary powers of the legislature, raises constitutional issues. The auditor has no business telling the legislature how it is that they should conduct the people's business. It's the people that are supposed to be telling the legislature how they want the legislature to operate. The auditor has no standing to do that. And in the other states where auditors do have so-called audit power over the legislature, it's not in areas that go to the heart of basic discretionary functions of the auditor in those states, because every state is different in terms of the auditor's responsibilities. In those states, they're only auditing the finances. There is no state auditor that looks at the discretionary activities of the legislative branch of government, inquiring as to how assignments are made to for office space, or who gets to be in positions of leadership, or how many formal sessions there are in the course of a year, and how many roll call votes there are. There's no auditor that assesses the legislature in those ways because of the constitutional limitations. And so my great fear here is that this will pass, and frankly, I expect that it will, because because who knows about the nuances of government auditing standards. And yes, indeed, it sounds like a great idea to hold the legislature accountable for its activities, but this is going to result in just political clashes with the legislature that I feel already have and will continue to devalue the role of the auditor in state government as an objective finder of truth, and instead has put the office on a collision course with another of the branches of state government. And so while inherently it's not a bad idea to see that the legislature is properly putting things out to bid and properly keeping track of its of other things that the rest of state government is required to do, but to give the auditor this ability to abuse the power of the office, which she's already indicated an intention to do. It's just, I can't go there. So I'm voting no.
Great, thank you. Suzanne, we have time for a couple of questions, I think, from the room. Anybody in the room? Dave Tarkowski?
So, yeah, it could just be the media that I consume, but the elephant in the room that I don't see addressed with the auditing is the non-disclosure agreements that really put this ugly on it. And
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing what you're saying.
I'll translate. There's a concern about non-disclosure agreements that seem to be a target of Auditor DiZoglio's intent here, and how
like the existence of these non-disclosure agreements from 2018, this whole big story, seems to really indicate that some sunlight is needed on the legislature.
Yeah.
So if not this, then what?
the presence of NDAs may indicate that some sunlight is needed on the legislature, especially that part of their that part of their personnel management process. If not this audit, then how does that process open up?
It opens up by the people telling the members of the legislature what they want. You know, when I first got elected to the legislature, it was back in 1984, and in those elections for state representative in particular, in the legislature, the major issue topics were: what are the rules under which the legislature should operate and who should lead the legislature? It was rules reform and leadership change. Those were on the agenda because the people demanded it. NDAs, whether you like them or you don't like them, are allowed under law. And the function of the auditor is not just to do fact finding and opining. It is to determine conformance with established procedures. And so this inquiry about NDAs, while a completely valid inquiry to be made, is not one to be made by the auditor, because whether they exist or they don't exist, it is they are legally allowable, and are used quite frequently, not just in public, but in private sector employment as well. I mean, I appreciate the concerns, but just because there is concern doesn't mean it is or it should be the responsibility of the auditor to do this.
Okay, thank you. One more question in the room, Stephen?
You keep saying that the individual voter should exercise this authority here, but isn't that what the ballot initiative is?
The question is, you talk about voters exercising their will, if you will, to help open up the legislature and make its workings more transparent. But isn't that what the ballot initiative is trying to do?
No, because it's not the people that are doing this. It will be the auditor that will be doing this, and will be performing a function that is not consistent with the law that establishes how the auditor's office itself is supposed to operate, which is by following established government auditing standards that are set by the Government Accountability Office within the federal level of government. And you may recall in the past, I made some, there was a bit of a to do, and I boasted about the fact that we were getting scoring high in our peer reviews. Every 3 years, auditors from around the country come and review the activities of the auditor's office, and the auditor's office itself gets judged on whether it is adhering to government auditing standards. These activities that Auditor Zoglio is proposing go beyond what's permitted by government auditing standards. It will put her out in the office out of compliance with government auditing standards.
All righty. I think, unfortunately, I think that's all the time we have for question 1. Suzanne, I really appreciate your time tonight.
Well, thank you.
The questions from the room. Have a pleasant evening. Enjoy your
Thank you.
next engagement, and we're going to move on to question 2.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, bye-bye.
All right, moving on to question 2. I see Will Austin has joined us. Will represents the no side, the against.
Guys, I'm starting. Be quiet.
I don't yet see anybody from the Yes on 2 campaign. If there's somebody on the phone who is that person, please make your presence known. All right. Well, Will, we're gonna upend our process and go no first.
Okay.
So, but let me just do a little quick summary here. So question 2 is the elimination of MCAS as a high school graduation requirement. From the Secretary of State's book, the summary reads, this proposed law would eliminate the requirement that a student pass the Massachusetts Comprehensive Assessment System MCAS tests or other statewide or district-wide assessments in mathematics, science, and technology, and English in order to receive a high school diploma. Instead, in order for a student to receive a high school diploma, the proposed law would require the student to complete coursework certified by the student's district as demonstrating mastery of the competencies contained in the state academic standards in mathematics, science, and technology and English, as well as any additional areas determined by the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. A yes vote would eliminate the requirement. A no vote makes no change in the law. So, Mr. Austin, please introduce yourself and tell us why question 2 is a bad idea.
First of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to present tonight. Lawrence, thank you for your help and facilitation. To my fellow Democrats in Medway, are willing to spend their time, their own evening on the public good. Thank you. My name is Will Austin. I was a public school teacher, principal, and school leader in Roxbury for 15 years. And after that, I have run an initiative called the Boston Schools Fund that increases access to high quality schools in the city of Boston. I serve on the executive committee on No on 2, and we oppose the ballot question. As a Boston public school graduate, as an educator my entire professional life, excuse me, and as a parent, what I appreciate about Massachusetts schools is that they are rooted in the values of fairness. Since 1993, no matter where you live, no matter how long you lived here, who your family is, how much money you have, Massachusetts makes you a promise that we'd have the same standards, the same expectations for every child. So every child could grow and graduate from high school and be ready for college and career. And because we obviously live in state with inequalities, we would level the playing field by providing tons of resources and state assistance that communities needed it. And despite all its imperfections, this has worked. Massachusetts public schools consistently rank as some of the best in the country. Question 2, which would eliminate our only common assessment of those standards, shatters this promise. Overnight, different school districts would have different standards, and we'd be right back to the uneven playing field that me and others have been fighting for the last 30 years. It's fundamentally unfair, inequitable to make different promises to different kids and different families in different places. That type of thinking would take Massachusetts from the top to the very bottom, lagging behind states like Alabama and Mississippi in their standards. Now, from proponents who didn't hear from tonight, but you've sure seen the commercials, you'll hear a lot of catchphrases, things like high stakes tests. But 3/4 of the kids passed the MCAS on the first try in 10th grade. And you may not know that kids get 4 more chances to pass it. And if they don't pass it, they have alternative processes and appeals to graduate from high school. That is why only 700 of the 70,000 Massachusetts seniors don't graduate high school because they can't pass the MCAS. That's not 1%. That's 0.1%. So this is not a high stakes test. 2, you'll hear about teaching to the test. It's a phrase that sounds bad. But I would say as an educator, that is literally what every teacher does. Whether you're at a Montessori school or Bright Horizons or Bridgewater State, if you're a teacher, you give assessments to see how your kids are doing. And as a Massachusetts public school teacher, as I was, it is your charge. It's your duty to know the standards that will prepare kids for college and career and assess them to make sure they're making progress. Now, when I taught middle school and high school math, if I gave a test on fractions and everyone passed except for one kid, I didn't say, well, guess I shouldn't have taught fractions. I tutored the kid who couldn't get it. And we kept working till he or she got it. And we owe that to all of our kids, especially our most marginalized kids, our English learners and kids with special needs. Giving an assessment is not unfair in and of itself. Not working with all kids to meet the standards of that assessment, that's unfair. And to close, I would just say that it's not even fair to describe this ballot initiative as a solution. Here's the kicker. We still have to give the MCAS. Federal law requires standardized tests, grades 3 through 8 in high school. So even if this ballot initiative passes, we're going to still spend time and money giving the test, but it doesn't count? That sounds like an even bigger waste of time. And what will we get instead? The proponents can't answer. The ballot eliminates the MCAS requirement, but gives nothing in its place. So we're not really in this situation proposing anything. We're just against something. And that really doesn't offer an alternative. And that's just not how we should be making public policy. You know, for reasons like this and more, I'm one of the many educators that are No on 2. You won't just see educators in our coalition, but you'll also see the governor, Senate President Spilker, Speaker Mariano, the Boston Globe, and every major media and newspaper in the city in the state has supported our position, the Massachusetts Superintendent Association, and again, principals, teachers, families, and students. I urge you all to preserve our public schools, protect our kids' futures, and vote No on 2.
All right, well, thank you very much. Any questions in the room here? Oh, yes, got 1, 2, 3, I think.
Oh, wow.
Okay, good. Hold on, I got a few questions in the room. And just, excuse me, Will, it's kind of hard. I've only got the one.
Yeah, I get it.
my
Well, I
DC,
appreciate
so
it. And thank you.
I'll
You
trans-
accommodated me by doing this remotely too. So I'm happy to be patient. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I am for the yes. I also worked in the public schools. I was an aide that worked with in a behavioral program, it's a safety separate program. For 5 years, I became a certified Wilson instructor for children with dyslexia and other reading disabilities. And at the time that the MCAS was first initiated, for a few years, I was allowed to proctor these tests. So I have proctored them. And I have to say, quite honestly, I have never seen a test as pretentious as this one. It's like, I'm sitting there and I'm going, what? And you're not supposed to clarify anything for these kids. It's like, well, I'm glad about that because some of these instructions I wouldn't be able to clarify anyway, because I can't figure it out. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I do believe that this test, in the beginning anyway, had nothing to do with the kids, okay? I think there was an ulterior motive. I think it had to do with the criticizing of teachers. At the time, it was like a huge thing to be really anti-teacher. I remember that, like going full steam. And the time that it takes, first, I do realize this question is only to eliminate it being a requirement. But the reasons that I am saying what I'm saying is the very reason why it shouldn't be a requirement. It's a very flawed test. We need to use our higher order thinking skills when it comes to this decision. When I say teaching to the test, right after Christmas vacation, okay? These kids get educated from September until the end of December, and then January comes, teaching to the test, teaching to the test,
All right.
teaching to the test, okay?
Okay. Great. So
I didn't get a question.
a fundamentally flawed test for high stakes.
Let me just, I appreciate everyone's lived experience and it just doesn't match mine. As I was a teacher for many years, I'll just clarify a couple points. First of all, every question in the MCAS, guess who it's generated by? Massachusetts teachers. They review them through a committee structure to make sure they're aligned with the standards and that they're not biased. And so if we have a problem with the questions, then there are committees in place to revise that. And I'm not here to defend the MCAS. The MCAS definitely needs upgrading, but my point is that we shouldn't eliminate the standard completely. Second point about teaching the test, because of computers now, we actually spend significantly less time giving tests than we used to. Department of Elementary and Secondary Education estimates that only 1% of learning time per year goes to administering the MCAS. And last thing I'll say is that how people spend their time, whether it's September to December or January to June, is the decision of the educator. I taught middle school and high school math for 8 years. I never once tutored for the MCAS. The MCAS was the floor, not my ceiling. I associated with different standards from the National Council of Teachers Mathematics, Advanced Placements, SSAT. And so it's not a binary thing. You can't say just because of the MCAS, you can't do higher order thinking. You can do both.
All right. Any other questions in the room? Sue?
So teaching to the test, but isn't the test supposed to be on the math frameworks, on the curriculum for Massachusetts? So if you're teaching to the test, you're teaching to the math curriculum. So I don't really see why that would be so different.
So teaching to the test is fairly similar to teaching to the mass curriculum framework. Is that right?
Yes, that is accurate because the whole point is the assessment should reflect the standards.
All right.
Because we, as a state, as a set of legislators, as a Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, have made standards that we agree prepare kids for college and career. And then the goal of the assessment is to match those standards. That's exactly what we're supposed to do.
All right. So just a follow-up on that. I know. I have a question though.
Lauren has the mic. Go ahead, Lauren.
So really what the test is, it's a test of the curriculum. And
yes. So I taught, like I said, I taught for many, many years.
Well, hang on, just let me finish my thought here.
Oh, you're good.
It's a test of the curriculum and the framework, and it's a test of how well that curriculum is, for lack of a better word, delivered to the students.
That is a very fair way of describing it.
Okay, so, but that's fundamentally different from testing the child. I know you
Yes.
talked about this, but I want to get those 2 points together.
Yeah, and so the way I would square those two things is you're right, it's doing two things at once, right? As an educator, it's giving me feedback on my own instruction, right? How well am I teaching towards certain standards? That's 100% correct. In terms of students, right? It is determining in a summative way whether they've met those standards. So it is doing both. And I would just say that there's pretty clear research that was released by Brown University that shows that there's a pretty strong correlation between kids who do better on MCAS. And again, that's across all races and all income status, that those students tend to go to college at a higher rate, and they tend to make more money when they're older. I see someone shaking their head. If they've got different research to reference, that's fine, but it's out of John Papay, and I can send you the link if you'd like.
Okay, we have one more question in the room, and then Susan will get to you, okay? And Anna after Susan. Allison, go ahead.
Are not meeting the standards of math. That should maybe be a rigorous test, but that the individual students shouldn't be barred from graduating because of that. And I also wanted to know how often these tests are evaluated and changed depending on what feedback we're getting.
What was the question, Lawrence?
All that?
No, I couldn't hear. Thank you,
I'm going
Lawrence.
to give you the second part first.
Okay, go.
How often is the MCAS test, or are the tests upgraded? And then the first part of the question is, why should the individual student bear the burden of, I wouldn't call it punishment, but the stigma of failure for a test that's A, flawed, and B, not really doing its intended function as well as it could?
So second one first. Is that right, Lawrence? Is that all of it?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Test gets updated every year, right? Based on data, and they replace questions. And there have been kind of broader overhauls of the test several times. The most recent one was probably 5 or 6 years ago, if I'm right. So it's not a static thing. It does change based on kids' performance over time, additional research, teacher input. On the first point, I just want to reiterate again, I'm not necessarily here to do the most unpopular thing on earth, would be just to defend standardized tests. That's not necessarily what I'm trying to do here. What I'm saying is that if we do eliminate the MCAS graduation requirement, which this does, it means that every single district will have different graduation standards. And I would say to you that, yes, there's this question around the individual and what does it mean not to pass? And we can have that intellectual and moral debate. But I also think that we don't like an idea where kids get fundamentally different educations based on which community they live in Massachusetts.
Okay, we got 3 more questions for you, Will.
Sure.
You're a popular guy tonight.
Popular is an interesting word, Lawrence. I don't know if I would use that.
So Susan McAllis from Westboro, unmute yourself and ask your question. No, we can't hear you.
You type in the chat if her volume's not working.
There you go.
I got it. I'm concerned about the students that come from other countries and their, say, 10th grade level, and then they have to take this test. And I'm not talking about the math. I'm talking about the English. And there are parts in that English that these children have never heard of. And they're supposed to answer a question, and most of them don't get it right, which to me, if their grades are good enough to graduate, they should not have to take the test in their senior year. And I really feel that if their grades are showing performance, then it doesn't matter because they're graduating.
It's a fair point, and it's a recent topic. But I'll give you an example. In Boston, we have a school dedicated to newcomers that's been around for about 20 years. It's called Boston International Newcomers Academy, and that is exactly what happens. Kids come at 13 or 14, and they don't speak English. What that school does is it keeps kids for longer. So in Massachusetts, kids can attend public school to the age of 22. So you ever go visit that school, what you'll see is that if a kid needs more time to meet the standard, they get more time to meet the standard.
I'm sorry. No.
All righty. Martin Young? Unmute and ask. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's Jonathan Rappaport, actually. Do you have somebody that's going to be speaking for the question or not?
Well, we had somebody lined up, but they have not shown yet, so.
All right, so I would be very happy to do that if you don't mind.
Well, in a bit, we have, I think, 2 more questions and then we can let Will go. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Sure, thanks a lot. Anna, you had a question? Unmute.
And,
Anna? Okay, Anna, I'm gonna move on to our next questioner, Tracy Stewart.
Hi. Hey, Will, thanks for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Full disclosure, I am a school committee member at Tri-County Regional Voc Tech in Franklin.
Oh, I know that.
And I was reading the New Bedford Light article regarding this issue, and it seems to me that a lot of concern, and I'm looking for you to convince me otherwise, that we do have higher graduation rates in a lot of the Chapter 74 program schools, and that it may not necessarily be the right structure for a Voc Tech school to be part of MCAS.
It's a good question. I'm not an expert in vocational education. I'm not in a school committee like you, but I'd come back to what I said earlier, which is that the MCAS, for lack of a better metaphor, is supposed to be a floor, not a ceiling. High school should not just be getting kids prepared for MCAS. They should be preparing kids for a variety of different assessments, including that's associated with voc ed. Research I have seen indicates that students in vocational schools in Massachusetts do as well, if not better, on most assessments than general education peers. I might be mistaken in remembering that, but this is all to say that there are nuances to this, as we've learned on this call. And I think we can all agree a yes/no vote on one day may not be the best way to make public policy. Let's update the MCAS. Let's update assessment to meet technology and kids today. Let's do that collaboratively through a legislative process like we did with the Student Opportunity Act in 2019, the Achievement Act in 2010, and the Ed Reform Act in 1993. Let's not make this a yes/no vote without really knowing what we're getting on the other side.
All righty.
I can agree with you on that.
All right, I got one.
Tracy, we
Yes.
got to move on. I'm sorry.
know.
All right, thank you, Lawrence. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your question.
Will, thank you very much for your time. Very much appreciated. Jonathan Rappaport, I'm going to take you up. I'm going to give you 3 minutes. Unfortunately, we're a little behind schedule. So if you can give us 3 minutes on why question 2 is a great idea, we'd very much appreciate it.
Okay, the whole issue with MCAS.
Sure. Before you introduce yourself, Jonathan, and tell us what your expertise is on addressing this issue.
Okay, I'm a retired educator. I taught for 38 years in public schools in New York, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. I was the arts coordinator for the City of Worcester Public Schools for 3 years. I was also head of school of the Conservatory Lab Charter School in Boston for 3 years. I'm a very experienced educator. I've been involved in training teachers since the 1970s. So this is an area that I'm pretty familiar with. So to speak to the issue, MCAS stands for Massachusetts Comprehensive Assessment System. It has never been comprehensive. It's been a standardized test. In grades 3 through 8, it takes weeks of testing time, which takes away from instructional time. And all of these tests are very time consuming. It has restricted the curriculum because of the panic of having to achieve in reading and math in many of these grades. The math and reading instruction time has increased significantly at the expense of social studies, civics, foreign languages, the arts, etc. It has been a very serious problem that's been going on since No Child Left Behind in around 2001. So this is not something to be taken lightly. I would also say that there is very strong evidence out there. This was supposed to help reduce the achievement gap between lower economic kids and the wealthier suburban kids. In fact, since MCAS has been instituted, the achievement gap is larger, not smaller. So it's important to know some of these things. There are many, many students who are traumatized by the taking of these tests. There are students that do not do well on tests. And to have that as the single thing that is going to either make or break a kid from graduating high school is really ridiculous. And to say that then you're going to end up with different kinds of standards is baloney. All the schools have to follow the mass curriculum frameworks, and the passing of kids from grade to grade is going to be based on that. And that's what it is now. So I really think the logic of having these tests as being kind of a winner take all in grade 10 is not very productive. So I don't know, I probably have used my 3 minutes. I have a lot more to say, but that kind of summarizes it.
Great. Jonathan, thank you very much. Any questions in the room? Nope. Any questions on Zoom? Anna,
Yes,
actually this time.
right. I unmuted while I was in limbo out there. In New York State in the 1960s, there was a Regents exam. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with that. If I remember correctly, everyone would take the Regents exam in various subjects. I still have a little worn booklet of the questions on American history, etc. If you passed a Regents exam, you would get a Regents diploma. They were different arrangements. Regents, Regents with honor, Regents scientific, depending on the coursework in high school. The best was Regents scientific with honor. I think I didn't achieve that one. And so you would either get, as I said, the Regents diploma, which was standardized throughout the state. And then if you didn't, based on your own coursework and your marks and whatever else, you would get a high school diploma, because right now with the high school diploma as a real barrier for some people when they don't have one, if someone has learning disabilities but could do a really good job in whatever job, some of those, because I remember in the library, even to get a job at a grocery store, you have to apply online. And some of these barriers are ridiculous. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions, comments? All righty. Well, thank you very much. Spirited discussion of question 2. We're going to move on to question 3. And which relates to unionization for transportation network drivers. In the Secretary of State's book, there's a very, well, it's a 1-page, but it's a very dense 1-page summary of the law. I'm going to read what your vote will do. A yes vote would provide transportation network drivers the option to form unions to collectively bargain with transportation network companies regarding wages, benefits, and terms and conditions of work. A no vote would make no change in the law relative to the ability of transportation network drivers to form unions. Now, tonight to represent the yes side on this, we have several folks. We have Pablo Ruiz. We have Joel Rivera, and we have Patrick Cruzy. So, gentlemen, unmute yourselves, and the floor is yours. You have about 5 minutes to make your statements, and then we're going to give you about 5 minutes for questions. Okay? Fire away.
Thank you, Lawrence, and thanks to all of you for your work, for this invite today. Somebody who served on the state committee, and somebody who is led local Democratic Party efforts. I really want to just thank you all for your work day in, day out. As mentioned, my name is Pablo Ruiz. I'm the political director with SEIU. That's local 32BJ. We are, leading this coalition work along with the International Association of Machinists, Machinist Union, as well as the Chinese Progressive Association. And I do have a colleague here, Patrick, who is a driver that I hope we can hear from here pretty quick. Patrick, I just want to quickly kind of give a quick overview of the bill, and then I'll turn it over to you. I see you in the room. Obviously, ballot question 3 is something that we are calling the yes vote for. Unlike, most other workers, rideshare drivers here in the Commonwealth, rideshare drivers are those who drive for companies like Uber and Lyft. They cannot form a union. They cannot form a union anywhere in the States, actually. The yes vote on this year's ballot would allow you all as voters to be the first in the nation by establishing Uber and Lyft drivers the option to join a union without sacrificing their independence, their flexibility of their jobs. With the union, obviously, these drivers would be able to negotiate, with the companies on wages, on benefits, working conditions, and drivers would have an organization to represent them, right? In any variation of dispute with the companies. So if this sounds familiar, Massachusetts has done this before. Massachusetts has paved the way for rideshare drivers by previously creating similar statewide systems for folks like the childcare providers, in-home childcare providers. Those are our brothers and sisters at SEIU 509, and home health aides. These are the personal care attendants, also our siblings at SEIU 1199. So obviously these systems have improved the lives of these workers. These workers have been able to build political power. And so before we get into a few of the other additional details, I'll just quickly say that there are nearly 80,000 permitted drivers in the Commonwealth. So Patrick, I'll pause here if you want to come off a mute and share your firsthand perspective as a driver. We have, as a coalition, have been organizing thousands of drivers for the last couple of years. And I'm excited that Patrick can join us and speak to it directly. Patrick?
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Patrick. I've been driving for Uber the past probably 12 years. And then I was doing part-time, and the past 2 years I was doing full-time. And we just noticed this industry keep changing every day, and Uber has been squeezing us when it comes to the paid. And it's giving us the burden to take care of everything, because they're taking some-time 40%, 50% or more out of the fare the customer paid, and it left us on the squeezing spot where there's nothing we can do with the money because they're taking so much. And the reason I joined this union and to volunteer about this stuff, it's for to make sure like we can get a union, and the union can help us to bargain for good benefit and good paid. Another thing also, the reason I joined it, because I noticed also there's some few driver, they got deactivated without trial. They will go back to the office, they'll tell them to send the email, and it's very scary. Especially me, I wanted to upgrade myself on Uber Black, and I'm scared to get like a $80,000 car, and at any time, at any point, I may get deactivated. And that scared me. That's why I joined this movement. And I would like you guys also to support us on question number 3, so we can be able to have a union and protect our job. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. As Patrick mentioned, deactivation, one of the biggest problems we hear over and over from drivers. Essentially, being deactivated means you are dismissed from the app. You no longer can work. So essentially, firing workers without any kind of process has been tremendous. Patrick hit it on the head. Folks are investing, vehicles, Suburbans, to be able to offer, the higher level of a ride. From one day to the next can be stuck with a $70,000-$80,000 car loan, and not have any kind of due process. So all kinds of complications there. But The other thing I'll just quickly state is, many of you might have seen the favorable polling from the Suffolk University poll yesterday that came out. We think that we have a strong path here, and we hope to continue to grow to the list of endorsements that you can see on our website. I just dropped the website as well as our social media handles in the chat. We're excited to roll out endorsements from Congressman McGovern, from Congresswoman Presley, Congresswoman Trahan. We're excited to have Attorney General Campbell from day one, from our kickoff, endorsing. Of course, she's taken these companies to task, and she's seen up close, right, how these companies treat these workers, and has said publicly, that she is excited to establish a floor for these workers on some of the benefits that many of us helped establish here in the Commonwealth, right? Sick time and paid leave, and so we're excited to have a growing list of endorsements there.
Pablo, thanks for your time. We have, I want to make some time for questions though, okay? Anybody in the room? Questions, comments? I have a question for you. So, it does not specify it in the initiative. It says that drivers could form a union, but it doesn't say anything about joining an existing union. I assume that they would join, for example, SEIU or some other existing union. Is that generally the case? Or is the idea to create a union that is specific to transportation network drivers?
Yeah, good question. So as I mentioned before, we are in coalition here, right, with the Union of Machinists, and so we would establish a new union. Of course, winning yes on 3 with your help would then create that state system that I talked about. Of course, there would still be the steps, right, that drivers would need, right, to hold a union election, right, and determine whether they're joining a union or not. So, yeah. But we think we have, all of the pieces. We think we've changed the conversation on rideshare drivers in particular, and every day, every weekend, we've got a growing number of drivers and community allies out knocking on doors and getting out the word and doing the direct voter contact.
Got another question for you, Tracy.
Hi, yeah, hopefully a quick one. There were hearings at the State House about this, I think about a year ago, for a bill. And I think Senator Feeney was part of that. I'm wondering, A, is he in favor? And B, is this vote on the ballot because of something that happened with the bill?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. So there was a couple of different hearings. I don't exactly know which one you're referring to. Of course, we had legislation there. We had a hearing. And then remember, there was a hearing on all of the ballot questions. So I'm not clear which of those you are referring to. But to answer directly your question, yes, Senator Feeney is endorsing yes on 3, along with Senator Jalen, who's the Labor Committee chair, along with, I think we're over, 50 elected officials across the state, some of which I already highlighted. So yeah, we are excited to take that momentum to voters and win yes on 3 with all of your help.
All righty. Any other questions in the room or on the Zoom?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we have one more in the room. That's it.
Question, Paul Feeney is listed among the senators who are part of the majority report, and the majority found against this bill.
Yeah, so
Majority recommended ought not to be enacted by the legislature. And
Right.
He's one of the signatories.
he's a committee member or
He's one of
in the majority?
the 7 senators.
Okay.
One of the 3 senators,
Okay. So point of clarification,
not clear that he's an endorser.
right. It's not clear that Senator Feeney is an endorser, as Colin points out. All righty. Pablo, Well,
He is
that's a-
he is an endorser. He absolutely is
Oh,
is an
okay.
endorser. Absolutely.
Good to know. Well, very good. Thank you very much for your time, gentlemen. Really appreciate it. We're gonna have to move
Thank
on
you.
though. Next up is question 4. And I do want to note that I did reach out several times to opponents of question 3 and had no response. So it's not for lack of trying that there isn't a no side represented on this call. Anyway, thank you guys. Appreciate it. Hang
Larry,
around if you want.
just to clarify, we don't, question 3 does not have an organized no side. So there was no one for you to call.
Well, it says in the Secretary of State's booklet here that Mass Fiscal Alliance provided an against argument. So we reached out to them. They failed to respond, so bye on them. Thank you very much, guys. Really appreciate it. So we're going to move on to question 4. Oh, what a long piece of legislation that is. Brendan, you guys must have stayed up late nights with your legal books and thesauruses to get this thing written. I'm going to give a quick summary, though. The legislation or the ballot question would allow limited legalization and regulation of certain natural psychedelic substances. A yes vote would allow persons over age 21 to use certain natural psychedelic substances under licensed supervision and to grow and possess limited quantities of those substances in their home, and would create a commission to regulate those substances. A no vote makes no change in the law regarding natural psychedelic substances. So here to speak for this question is Brendan Spencer. And Brendan, I don't know if Emily Alshek is going to join us as well.
Good evening, Larry, and thank you, Medway Democratic Town Committee, for having me here tonight. Unfortunately, Emily is unable to attend due to a last-minute conflict, so you have just me here. My name is Brendan Spencer. I'm with Yes on 4, also known as Massachusetts for Mental Health Options. Before I get into talking about the yes side of the question, I want to point out a couple of things about the no side. I am aware that they are not here this evening, and I typically don't like to speak for others, especially when they are not here. But based on when we've been in the same room together, I can certainly tell you that the presentation that you would hear from them is based on fear-mongering and conflating of data rather than being rooted in public health and from leading experts. I'll give you a couple of examples from the Red Book. I'm sure all of you have copies of the Red Book here. They make a pretty remarkable declarative statement saying that a black market is inevitable with this amount of home growth, end quote. The truth of the matter is, if somebody wanted right now at this very moment to buy what's called a grow kit to grow psychedelics at home, which would be illegal based on the law, but the truth of the matter is enforcement of home cultivation and growing of these substances is not readily enforced throughout the Commonwealth. But let's just say if somebody wanted to buy a grow kit and grow it at home, it would technically be legal for them to buy that grow kit. It becomes illegal when those spores germinate. So the fact that people can access these grow kits now readily online, you can buy one off Amazon. If there's any prospect of a black market, it's already here, and we're not really seeing an epidemic as our opponents have claimed would happen if people were able to grow at home, which they can technically grow at home right now. And then they cite statistics about operating under the influence. Operating under the influence of any substance is a very serious concern, and unfortunately too many lives are taken annually all throughout the country for those who are operating under the influence of various substances. They throw a couple of figures out, making it seem as though that this is already happening in the 2 states where similar measures have passed, Oregon and Colorado. There's just one problem with their data. The statistics that they rely on focus on 5 substances that are not at all in our ballot question, 2 of which are ketamine and PCP, which are addictive and are not in our ballot question. The 5 substances that are in our ballot question, psilocybin, psilocin, DMT, ibogaine, and mescaline, are all non-addictive and have very low risk of adverse effects. So enough about what you would hear from an opposition that did not bother to show up tonight. But I do want to talk about the yes side of the ballot question. So my apologies. We do have our opponent here. Good evening. So the reason why question 4 is on the ballot is that we are facing a severe mental health crisis. 1 in 3 adults in Massachusetts are experiencing symptoms of anxiety and or depressive disorder. Deaths of despair are very much on the rise, and there's a suicide epidemic among veterans and first responders and healthcare workers. While there are options right now in the form of daily medications, talk therapy, and other coping mechanisms, ultimately, for some people, these are not enough. Many of these coping mechanisms and tools are helping, but for some, it's just not enough. It's not doing the job that is needed. Thousands of Americans, including military veterans, first responders, and trauma survivors, have been helped by psychedelic medicines. Pioneering research from institutions such as Johns Hopkins, Harvard MGH, and Tufts have shown that natural psychedelic therapies can be effective for PTSD, depressive disorders, severe anxiety, and other difficult to treat conditions. The FDA, on 2 separate occasions, has designated breakthrough therapies to psilocybin. And what breakthrough therapies are designations to where the FDA evaluates the current field in terms of what available options there are, and ultimately conclude that whatever that designation receives, it is far and away the most promising and offers the most potential in terms of treating the particular ailments that the FDA is looking at, and where there is a need for further advancements there. So ultimately, with question 4, it's a citizen-led initiative. It's supported by military veterans, doctors, caregivers, and others who have been affected by our mental health crisis. Voting on yes will give veterans and first responders, patients with end-of-life distress, and people who are suffering from treatment-resistant mental health issues access to this life-saving mental health tool. Ultimately, what question 4 will do is a couple of important things. First of all, it will create a responsible, regulated program for therapeutic access to natural psychedelics. It will create a statewide governing body, statewide agency for that matter, with the guidance of an expert advisory board supporting it. It will allow individuals who are 21 plus or older to seek relief from a licensed and regulated facilitator at a licensed and regulated healing center. It will create a training program for facilitators based on a tiered licensing model, and it will ultimately, and most importantly, establish a compassionate approach grounded in public health and removes criminal penalties for limited personal use. What this ballot question will not do, it will not create an industry similar to cannabis. The truth of the matter is, here in Massachusetts, cannabis is a $7 billion industry annually. So the natural psychedelics will not be a $7 billion industry. It will not permit retail sales. So if this were to pass by the voters, individuals could not go into a healing center and walk out with psychedelics. It's not at all like cannabis here in Massachusetts. And at the same time, this is ultimately not a therapy for everyone. I am not somebody who has ever gone through this therapy, and I am not somebody who ultimately has a desire to. We all have our own unique physiological composition. And I know that this is not for me, and I know this is not for everybody, but this is definitely for thousands of Bay Staters. Also, it will not create immediate access following the ballot approval. So before the first healing centers were to open in Massachusetts, there would be about an 18 to 24 month rulemaking period, similar to the measure that was passed in Colorado in 2022 and in Oregon in 2020. Oregon opened their first healing centers in 2023, and as of June of this past year, over 3,500 people have benefited from that program out there, and there are about 30 healing centers throughout the state of Oregon.
Right. Brendan, we gotta wrap you up here.
Absolutely.
Got a couple of questions, I'm sure. So
absolutely.
Thanks for the presentation. Questions in the room? Oh, boy, bunch. Carol. Come up, shout or something.
On the use of the substances in a therapeutic setting, I'm not clear on why we have to go with homegrown and being able to exchange between people who are over 21. That seems, a lot of 21-year-olds know 19-year-olds, and how do we prevent that from happening? How do we go to people who are not old enough to make good decisions about this?
Did you get that one?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I was
It's why allow in-home growing, and why allow free exchange of materials among adults, or illegally but easily between adults and minors?
Sure. First off, the penalties would not change in terms of well, first off, this will be 21 plus. If somebody were to exchange a personal possession amount, again, I want to be clear, a personal possession amount, it would not be legal for them to give it to somebody who's a minor. It would not be legal to give it to someone who's between 18 and 20 and under 21 years old. Penalties would remain there. Same thing for home cultivation. If somebody were to flagrantly say, I would not adhere to the 12 by 12 regulations in terms of growing within those confines, the penalties would not change there. As of right now, the penalties on the books are, I believe, for a first offense, 5 years and a $5,000 fine. So those penalties would not change. The idea behind the home cultivation is in line with the American Medical Association's official guidance in favor of, quote, the elimination of criminal penalties for drug possession for personal use, end quote. That is an exact recommendation put forward by the American Medical Association. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we should not be trying to arrest people who are trying to heal. That's really where our mindset is in terms of this. And also, criminalization ultimately does force people to operate underground and discourages honest communications between individuals and their primary care physicians and other medical professionals. So that is more or less where our thinking is.
Got another question for you. Sue, did you have it?
I kind of had Carol's question, but I have another question, but I don't quite understand the answer. So if I grew it, can I give it to somebody or share it, even if if they're over 21?
If I grow it or somebody grows it, and can they give this substance, whether it's the raw materials or a distilled version of it, can they just give it to somebody else?
So in our ballot question, individuals are allowed to exchange, not for profit, but to exchange or gift to other adults who are 21 plus.
Today, are doctors allowed to prescribe these?
Can doctors prescribe these substances today, legally?
So in terms of whether doctors can legally prescribe it, no, they cannot. If this ballot question were to pass, doctors or anybody for that matter can go through a program to become a facilitator. The way that the ballot question is written is that the statewide commission would be given the latitude to establish the requirements for an individual to become a facilitator, the requirements that are necessary for an institution of accreditation to ultimately determine what curriculum is required in terms of training individuals to become a facilitator.
Great. And those standards do not exist today, is that correct?
They do not, but the statewide commission would be a 5-member commission appointed by the governor, the attorney general, as well as the treasurer, I believe. And that would be supported by an advisory board of subject matter experts. And I think I mentioned during my presentation, there would be an 18 to 24 month rulemaking period that would be open to the public, and similar to what's going on in Colorado at the moment. You can attend these public hearings, you can watch them on live stream, and it's very much a process where subject matter experts, public health officials, law enforcement, all relevant stakeholders are able to come together and model a program that works for Massachusetts and is based on the unique needs of the Commonwealth and of the people who would benefit most from this therapy.
So even though in the text of the question, it says this law would take effect December something of 2024. the expectation is that there's a long, slow rollout while commissions are formed, advisor groups are formed, regulations are developed, the overall regulatory structure and taxation structure is developed and so forth, right?
That is correct. So the effective date would be decriminalization of the 5 substances for personal amounts. But in the spring of 2025, there would be deadlines for the governor, for the attorney general, and the treasurer to move forward in terms of getting these 5 members of the commission appointed, and then working from there to build out the program.
Okay, we got a question on Zoom. I think it's John Rappaport. Or is it
No,
Martin Young?
it's actually Martin Young, who's sitting next to Jonathan Rappaport.
You guys look a lot alike.
Yeah, I'm a clinical psychologist with 45 years of experience with people with significant and serious mental health issues. I'm quite concerned about what's the criteria going to use for these quote facilitators who are going to decide whether a person is going to be allowed or qualified or given permission to use very significantly powerful psychoactive ingredients to treat a disorder that is a very significant mental disorder. Are these going to be healthcare providers, and what's their level of training? I mean, we developing a whole new profession here. This is very vague and worrisome for me.
First off, thank you so much for your question. And secondly, I want to answer your question in 2 parts. So in the ballot question itself, there is a prescribed multi-step process for people who want to pursue this therapy. The first of which would be a pre-screening session, a pre-screening process where individuals would have to give informed consent about the unique risks, either in general or to themselves. And then on top of that, the second part of my answer is that the commission would be empowered to set the requirements for individuals in terms of becoming facilitators. As an example, Oregon requires facilitators to go through 160 hours of training to become a facilitator, including as well as a 40-hour practicum. I believe it's a 40-hour practicum. I'm about 90% sure that's the case, but Massachusetts will certainly look towards Colorado and Oregon in terms of what works with those given programs, as well as take in feedback and really allowing public health leaders and experts to weigh in to really ensure that this program is done in a responsible, in a regulated way, and in a manner that leverages these very powerful substances in a manner that ultimately achieves what the goal of this ballot question is, which is to provide hope and healing to those who have been failed by other therapies and by pharmaceuticals.
Okay, Brendan, thanks a lot. We're gonna move on. Hang on though, you never know, more questions might come your way. I really appreciate your help in outlining the yes on 4.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Yeah, right now we've got unexpectedly, but thankfully we've got Chris Keahan, and I probably mangled your name terribly, but I think you were you on Egan and Browdy a week or 2 ago? Is that you talking about this particular question?
I was not. I believe it was Dr. Nasser that was on.
Okay, my error. So anyway, so you're a no on 4 guy. We're going to see you later as a no on 5 guy, but tell us about no on 4.
Sure. So the folks that put together the Coalition for Safe Communities, me being one, Dr. Dua, who is a doctor, world-renowned doctor from Mass General Hospital, we came together and currently are volunteering to do this. We came together because we had 3 major reasons to oppose this ballot question. Not because we are questioning the potential medicinal benefits that could be derived. But what we do see is a poorly written and ill-conceived ballot question. And why is that? The 3 reasons are this. When the marijuana ballot question passed 8 years ago, there was a specific provision written in there that if a community voted against it, a community could opt out. That provision is not in this ballot question. That means if it were to pass, all 351 cities and towns of Massachusetts would have to allow these facilities into their communities. The second reason we oppose this is the 144 square feet of home growth that this allows. And I'm glad Brennan mentioned the packages that you could order online right now. If you went online and ordered a package of mushrooms to grow in your house, it's basically a Ziploc bag. It's about 1 square foot that would grow more than enough for personal consumption. This ballot question allows for 144 square feet of grow. To put that in perspective, that's the average size of a bedroom here in Massachusetts. It's also more than enough to get every single person on this phone call high for over a week. The third and final reason that we're opposed to this is, and again, something that Brennan leaned into, that the legislature or the commission that's coming together could fix the problems that are in this ballot question. I think we can all agree that the Cannabis Control Commission is an utter disaster. It's on the headlines every day, and this is similar language and similar people pushing this. This would allow facilities to open under the guise of being medicine. But the people that would be required to run this, there is no requirement right now written into the ballot question that requires a single medical professional inside those facilities. These are psychedelic drugs that are very powerful, and while could help many in need, it poses significant dangers. Ibogaine, which is one of the 5, has a long history of study that shows severe heart impacts, including rapid onset death. That's through Ibogaine. Ibogaine, my apologies. To not have a medical professional at these facilities is negligent. To not have it written into the ballot question is negligent. To trust that a commission would fix this, yeah, I just can't buy that, especially seeing the commissions that have been set up here in Massachusetts. I'd also like to point out that Oregon, the example that Brennan gave, where they have 160 hours of training, that's 1 month of training, working full time. To put that in perspective for everyone, Massachusetts requires more than 10 times the amount of training to get your license to be a licensed tattoo artist. This is not a well thought out ballot question. There are significant flaws, and to rely on the legislature and to rely on a commission that has not been put together yet to fix the problems is just untenable for us. There is no question that even the yes folks have acknowledged the dangers. One of the things that have been written into this ballot question is that if you grow at that 144 square feet, it needs to be behind a locked door. And anyone that was a teenager and broke into their parents' liquor cabinet know how enticing it would be to break into that room. So this is a serious issue. I know we joke a little bit about it. If this had been written in a more well thought out way, if it wasn't being funded almost exclusively by the venture capitalists that will make money off of this, I would not be on this side. I would be on Brennan's side and other friends who are working on the yes side. I just cannot get behind it. One other thing to mention, as we talk about these, quote unquote clinics, I don't even necessarily want to call them that if there's not a medical professional on site. In Oregon, they are charging between $750 and $3,500 per visit. It's well documented in the press. The people that would be going to these clinics, the people that are being advertised to and used in these commercials to provide the hope and healing that everyone is talking about, could not possibly afford the amount of money that would be charged for these types of visits. The people that will benefit from this more than anyone else are the venture capitalists that are looking to create a new industry for them to make money off of, and to hide behind brave men and women who served in our military and are suffering through PTSD right now. To talk to the people that are end-stage cancer and people that are going through severe psychosis and schizophrenia and the other ailments that they're advertising to, I frankly find offensive, because they know full well that these folks could not, vast majority of them could not possibly afford this. How do we know that? Because in Oregon, over 80% of the people that are visiting these clinics are not actually from Oregon. They're flying in from other states.
Okay, great. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate your presentation here. Impromptu though it may be. Questions in the room? Yep, one here.
When they legalized marijuana, which I voted for, I noticed soon afterwards, I realized soon afterwards that there is no test, like a breathalyzer, for instance, for alcohol. If you are stopped for being in a car, for being under the influence of marijuana. And if I had to do it again, I would have voted no on the legalization of marijuana. It was putting the cart before the horse or something. So my question is there a test out there to test for people that may be driving under the influence of these medicines?
Yeah. Did you get that question?
To my knowledge, I did. To my knowledge, there is no test. We have had significant conversations with the Massachusetts State Police, and they say that one of the reasons, basically getting pulled over for drugged driving, not drunk driving, drug driving, is near impossible to prove, and they basically stopped doing it. It's one of the many reasons why the Massachusetts State Police Association has endorsed no, and are among other groups, including the Massachusetts Psychiatric Society, that are opposing this.
All righty. Any questions? Oh, one more question in the room, Sue?
They started therapies or learning how it can be effective for different mental health issues.
You get that question? Where's the medical community on this question?
So the Massachusetts
Question, but where are they on using psychedelics for therapy?
On the use of psychedelics for therapy, generally.
It's fairly split. You will have people on the yes and no side talk about the benefits and potential benefits. Many folks, the Massachusetts Psychiatric Society has endorsed no. Their president is actively campaigning with us. Dr. Dua, who works at Mass General, is opposed to this as well. You'll find some doctors that are split. There's no question about that. We're not arguing the potential medicinal benefits, but I would say that there are still studies that are ongoing. And Mass General Hospital has a clinic where they're doing an ongoing study as well. And most are saying let's get the details right before we pass something like this. It's also worth pointing out that the very folks that we're talking about that could potentially use these facilities, the ailments that they are dealing with make you exponentially higher to experience what's called a bad trip, and to have no medical professional there leaves you with no other solution but to call 911 while someone's standing next to you. It really is. It's poorly written, poorly thought out, and not something that is ready for prime time.
Okay. I think we have another question in the room. Allison or Katie? Sure. Give us a shout.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was just wondering if it doesn't seem like there's a ton of research to prove how wrong it could possibly go, but there's a lot of research to show the benefits of it. And I mean, to use the fear of underage and kids and the detriments of it, I feel like, alcohol is 1,000 times worse, and that's what people were suffering from PTSD and are more likely to go to and to make it worse. So, and there's always going to be people that abuse the system. So why take it away from the people that could potentially benefit from it?
The reason why is this is not written in a way that is medicine. And if it was written in a way that was medicine, there wouldn't be home growth. The fact that they wrote in and actually filed 2 separate ballot questions and decided decided which one to go with at the very end, that one allowed home growth and one didn't. The difference between home growth and these facilities is, as Brennan said, you have 18 to 24 months to gear up for the facilities. That leaves 18 to 24 months of people self-medicating a dangerous drug. 1 in 3 people. Now, it's all psychedelics. I will grant them this, that it's all psychedelics, but 1 in 3 frequent users of psychedelics admits to having driven while high. In a recent study that's on our website, safecommunitiesma.com. Now, any type of drunk or drug driving is unacceptable. If you are doing it on psychedelics, you are seeing things that aren't even there. If this were written in a way that were safe, that provided the type of medical treatment that should be available, and the type of safety measures that should have been put in place, I would not be sitting here. The fact of the matter is they have proposed a ballot question that on one hand is supposed to be providing medicine, and on the other is providing not microdosing and clinic type solutions, but growth in your house, in your house that puts children at risk, that puts pets at risk. Just look at any of the veterinarian coalitions that have come out. You can go right on YouTube right now, and there are hundreds of videos of veterinarians begging people to stop growing both marijuana and psychedelics in their house, because the amount of emergency visits that pets have had to veterinarians because of accidental ingestion of psychedelics or marijuana has increased incrementally over the past decade to a dangerous level. For children, it's dangerous. This is not something that should be done within a house to self-medicate without the proper safety protocols.
Great. Chris, I think we're going to have to call it at that.
Sure.
I really appreciate
Thank
your joining us on No on 4. Brendan, thank you again for your presentation on the Yes on 4. And now we're going to move on to the question 5. We've got James Wu representing Yes on 5, and Chris, lucky you. You got a double header today.
I get to miss bedtime with the kids, so I'm okay.
Question 5 relates to changing the minimum wage for tipped workers. Essentially, a yes vote would increase the minimum hourly wage. An employer must pay a tipped worker to the full state minimum wage implemented over 5 years, at which point employers could pool all tips and distribute them to all non-management workers. A no vote would make no change in the law governing tip pooling or the minimum wage for tipped workers. So James Wu, yes on 5, you have the floor. Thanks for your patience. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Larry, for the invitation, and thank you to the Medway DTC for having me here on your Zoom to join you guys virtually tonight. So hi everyone, good evening. My name is James Wu. I am here with the Yes on 5 campaign. And to put it simply, question 5 is a question that's based around fairness. It would do 2 things that Larry did just read from the Red Book, but I would also just like to touch on those 2 pieces briefly. One, the first piece that it would do is it would eliminate the tip sub minimum wage, which right now is $6.75 an hour, over the course of 5 years until it reaches the full state minimum wage of $15 an hour plus tips on top of that. The second piece that this would do is after those 5 years, then restaurants and bars would have the option to include back of house workers in their existing tip pools. This is already federal law. Only Massachusetts and New York are the 2 states that do not allow for tip sharing in this fashion. Like was stated in the Red Book, this only applies to non-managerial staff. Owners and managers would not be able to take part in this tip pool. So yes on 5, voting yes on 5 is fair. It's fair for workers, it's fair for employers, and it's especially fair for the consumer, the average restaurant goer who, just wants to enjoy dinner with their family or friends. It's fair for the workers who deserve a full minimum wage plus tips on top. Right now, $6.75 is like less than half of the state minimum wage. we are asking consumers to pay these servers and bartenders $8.25 an hour in tips, just so these workers can make up to $15 an hour. And that's not even getting on top of like other tips that might come in. We know from the 8 other states, sorry, Michigan just became the 8th today, this year. We know from the other states that have one fair wage that tipped workers in those states are making more in every income bracket, more than tipped workers in non-one fair wage states. So this is only fair for those workers who deserve the full minimum wage plus tips on top. It's also fair for employers. Many small restaurants in Massachusetts are already paying the full wage plus tips on top because they know that paying someone the full minimum wage plus tips on top is a way to reduce turnover in their staff. It's increasing retention, and it's also just improving service quality at those restaurants. And lastly, it's fair for consumers. The average restaurant goer, when you tip, we want to tip because we're rewarding good service or we're rewarding prompt service. But right now, the way the system is set up, this two-tiered wage system is set up, we are asking consumers to essentially be the boss of the tipped worker. We are asking consumers to subsidize all of these low poverty wages paid by large restaurant corporations who could afford to pay their workers more. In closing, and then I'm happy to just take questions from folks here and in the room as well. In closing, eliminating the tips on minimum wage is a national movement. It's in the Kamala Harris and Tim Walz's economic justice platform as one of their key priorities to eliminate the tips on minimum wage. We all know that this two-tiered tips on minimum wage system is broken. It's incredibly unenforceable. There are employers who are essentially not paying their workers enough because they say that tips will cover the rest. But we know from data from the Attorney General and complaints that have been filed at the Attorney General's office that wage theft is still rampant throughout the restaurant and hospitality industry. This is a national movement. Massachusetts is going to be a leader on this in the ballot this November 5th. So I hope that everyone here will vote yes on 5, either on or before November 5th. Thank you, Larry. And
all right. Thanks, James. Appreciate it. Questions in the room. Mendy.
I was wondering, any data showing whether or not tipping goes down when this passes? Because I'm assuming that restaurant prices are going to go up. So I'm wondering if people dining in restaurants, knowing that servers are being paid more, will pay less, both because their bill is higher, so they might have less in their budget to then go towards the tip, and then also because they would think that the server wouldn't eat as much. So I'm just wondering if anybody has looked at what happens with that.
Did you get that, James?
Yeah, I think there were 2 pieces to that question, which was the first piece was about tips, and the second piece was about restaurant prices, if I heard that correctly.
Yeah, more or less.
Okay, great. Just want to make sure I heard your full question correctly. So I'll answer the first piece first about tips. Again, I'll just point folks to kind of the other states that have already done one fair wage for decades. And in all of these states, tipping averages have not gone down than non-one fair wage states. In fact, tipping averages are the same across the board, if not higher, because they're seeing better service from better paid workers. The second piece of your question was about prices. And to that, I would just emphasize that this ballot question takes place over 5 years, which gives restaurants time to kind of adjust to these new costs that raising the minimum wage would bring. And we again see from all of these other states that have done one fair wage and from these successful small restaurants in Massachusetts already paying one fair wage, that menu prices are still comparable across the board. They are not, the price of a burger is not $50 now, just because these restaurants are paying one fair wage. And I would also just like to lift up a paper that the UMass Amherst Labor Center released just yesterday. So this is very recent data that found that question 5 would not actually, cause huge jumps in prices. And I'll just say that I've been to several of these states. People are still tipping the same, and the prices across the board are again just the same that as they are here in restaurants in Massachusetts.
Good. Any other questions in the room? Sue?
I have two questions. They're kind of related, but can the kitchen staff get paid the tip wages, like $6.75 an hour? And second question is, who decides that, based on this question, who decides that the tips will be pooled? Is that a vote by all staff or managers decide?
Did you get that?
Yes, so I think it was another two-parter, I think. First part was about back of house workers. So right now they are getting paid $15 an hour period because they are not receiving any tips, again, because Massachusetts does not follow this federal law of allowing them to be included in tip pools. And secondly, I think it was about who decides the tip pools, I believe was the question. So that is going to be done on a restaurant by restaurant basis. This ballot question does not mandate that restaurants or bars do this, and it does not set up any kind of structure that says you have to do X% to front of house and X% to back of house. So it is going to be done on a restaurant by restaurant basis.
But within the restaurant, who decides? Is it the staff or the manager, or would the staff vote to say we want to pool wages?
Chips.
Oh, okay. I heard that. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. So again, it is going to be very individualized. I believe in most restaurants, it is going to be decided by the manager. Of course, there are industry standards that folks follow so that they're not too one way or the other when it comes to how the industry itself goes. I also know that there are some restaurants where, the staff does decide. So again, it's a very individualized process. And because this is not a mandate, like restaurants also don't have to do this. They don't have to include back of house workers in this if they don't want to. It just makes it legal for those that want to do it.
Hey, James, we lost the in-room audio. Sorry about that.
Oh no.
Oh, there you go. You're back.
Okay. Did folks hear my answer to that last question, or should I repeat it?
Nearly all of it. Just missed the last maybe 15 seconds or so.
Oh, okay. I think I was just wrapping up by saying that again, because it is not a mandate, it is just allowing for this to happen. Restaurants and bars can choose to not do this at all. And they can choose to do this, and it would just make it legal for those that want to participate in this tip sharing. Again, if they don't want to, they don't have to. The ballot question does not mandate them do this. And ultimately, the tips will continue to go only to workers, not to restaurant owners, bosses, or managers. That is federal law. Tips belong to the workers. So I hope that answered the rest of your question.
Yes.
Great. Thanks, James. We're going to move on to Chris for the no on 5 side. Chris?
Thank you, everyone.
All yours.
Thanks for having me again. Where to start? This ballot question this ballot question again was brought forth by a group from outside of Massachusetts. They are answering a question that nobody here in Massachusetts was actually asking. If you look at this ballot question and look at the examples that are used around the country, I don't understand where the yes side is getting their numbers. Toast, which is the platform that almost every restaurant in America now uses to process orders and tips, says that California is the worst tipping state in the country, and they have empirical data. They process almost every single transaction in restaurants across the country. The 7 states that have never had the tip credit consistently rank as some of the worst in the country, with California always being the dead last in the country for tipping percentages. In Massachusetts, every single server is guaranteed $15 an hour between what they start with and their tips. If they're not, it's the response. If they don't make that $15 an hour, it is the responsibility of the owner to make up the difference. If they're not, they are breaking the law and they absolutely should be punished. This doesn't address that. The other states that this is active in, outside of the 7 that were mentioned, in Maine this passed, and it lasts less than a year because servers and bartenders marched to the state house and city halls and said overturn it. It was overturned in less than a year. That's how aggravated the people were that this passed. Washington, D.C. has had this on the books for just over a year now. They started with 30,000 tipped employees. They are now down to 26,000 tipped employees. People are leaving the industry or being laid off, and they're going to Northern Virginia and Southern Maine, Southern Maryland, on a rapid basis to get away from this law specifically. If you go to DC, you will see that over 90% of the restaurants have increased their prices drastically, and 76% of the restaurants have implemented what's called a service fee. Most are averaging between 20 and 25%. When this campaign first started, and I work with unions almost exclusively, a union asked me to take this job. When we first started, we did a survey of servers and bartenders and asked them what they thought. 91% said they were opposed to this ballot question. They did not want this change. We asked them what they thought would happen to their wages, and they overwhelmingly told us they thought their wages would go down because tipping would be reduced. So when we did our first poll of the general public, we specifically asked, if you knew your server was making the $15 minimum wage, would you tip more or less? Voters were 8 times more likely to say they would tip less than tip more. We asked them if they knew their server or bartender were part of a tip pool, would they tip more or tip less? And they said they were 3 times more likely to tip less if they knew they were part of a tip pool. The red book argument that I'm sure many of you have already read, the yes and no side, you get 150 words. And in those 150 words, the yes campaign used the term big corporation 4 times. Over 90% of the restaurants here in Massachusetts are not big corporations. They are considered small businesses. Those small businesses are either going to have to increase their prices, implement those service fees, implement automation and QR codes, or cut back from full service restaurants to quick service restaurants. This doesn't work. And it's been proven time and time again in the places that they have tried to implement this that it doesn't work. The servers and bartenders that we work with on a regular basis overwhelmingly oppose this. And you can look no further than the campaigns themselves. While the other side likes to use the term big corporations, look at who is participating in these campaigns. Our campaign has over 1,000 servers and bartenders actively volunteering and signing petitions and contacting voters. Our campaign has dozens of donations from servers and bartenders. The Yes campaign has a total of 0 contributions from a server or bartender here in Massachusetts. 0. It's been filed 5 different legislative sessions in a row. They've been here for 10 years trying to pass this, and in 10 years, they have found not a single server willing to contribute to say, I want to change this.
Okay. Chris,
that should tell you everything you need to know.
Yeah, we've got to, I want to get to questions in the room and on the Zoom here. So, but thanks for your statement. Wow.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I see the signs all over town, and not one says vote yes on this particular question. It's all no. And I've talked to servers about this. My daughter being a server, but not in Massachusetts. So I had to ask her some questions based on what a good friend of mine had. She had questions about this. She was wondering if, for instance, these people who get tipped, whether the ones who don't get tips in the restaurant, like the cooks and the dishwashers, people like that, what happens to them? So I asked my daughter, and the cooks in her restaurant get paid $20 an hour to start. The dishwashers and the hostesses, they get paid minimum wage to start, which is $15 in the state of Rhode Island. She gets, as a server, she gets $3 plus change in her wage. But she would pay, but as a result of that, her tips actually wind up making more than she would have if this was the law that's trying to be passed in Massachusetts took place. And I'm thinking, why not? Well, I mean, why? Why should that happen? It isn't like anybody's getting ripped off here. The next question was, if my daughter was to work a shift, a lousy shift, so to say, then what happens, you know? Well, by law in Rhode Island, the employer has to make up to her anything up to the minimum wage. So she would at least get that. So nobody's getting hurt here, the restaurant that she's working. And I just want to make that known to people.
Great. An observation, not a question.
It was an observation, yeah.
Great. Sue, did you have a question?
I'm just curious, what, I can read his name. but-
Chris?
Yeah, what his interests in this topic are. You didn't really reintroduce yourself on this topic. So I mean that in a friendly way.
I'm sorry, I just couldn't hear it.
Can you tell us your expertise or the reasons behind your advocacy of the no on 5?
Sure. So I actually do, I run a political campaign company here in Massachusetts. I've worked for many politicians that you probably know. Former Mayor Walsh, I'm the advisor for Treasurer Goldberg. I do an extensive amount of work with unions, particularly the building trades and the hospitality workers. And the hospitality workers are actually the ones that asked me to take this campaign on to help advocate for no, because they're opposed to it specifically because of the tip pooling that would be part of this. And I just like to point out that the way this ballot question is written, it's actually section 6. If you go to your red book and look at it, section 6 is the part that specifically talks about tip pooling. This isn't up to anyone except for the owners. And you've heard a lot from the yes side about how you can't necessarily trust owners, which is why I find their entire argument dubious. If we can't trust owners to properly pay people, why are we putting the tip pooling decision directly in their hands? It makes no sense. And it doesn't provide any guidelines other than the federal law that says managers and owners can't take the can't participate in the tip pool. But if you walked into a restaurant right now and gave a $50 tip, that tip most likely goes directly to that server. If this were to pass and you gave that same $50 tip, that server has to give that tip to their manager and owner, and the manager and owner would decide how that was broken up. And you could get 5, you could get 10, you could get whatever, but that's the way this ballot question is written. You would not be able to decide if you participated in the tip pool, and you wouldn't be able to decide how it was broken up. And that's not the way it is now.
Other questions in the room, Dave?
So yeah, excuse me, question about funding and motivation. So 2-part question. One, you said that the yes on the yes proponents are funded by out of state. But looking at the donations, it looks like the no has a significant number of out of state donations as well from across the country. And 2, you said zero, the yes committee has gotten 0 donations from servers. But looking at their donation list, it looks like that's not true. Because occupation has to be listed in any political donation. And I see people that I see, for example, on September 5th, the bartender donated $50 to them. So I'm just I'm curious about your sources on funding.
The OCPF, the only person that has donated that lists bartender or server is a person from New York. There are no Massachusetts servers or bartenders listed that list bartender or server as their person. A vast majority of their funding has come directly from One Fair Wage itself, and One Fair Wage is currently under investigation in multiple states for misuse of their 501c3 status, and they announced a $2 million anonymous donor here in Massachusetts, which is blatantly illegal, and they're under investigation from OCPF because of that as well.
Oh, well.
So there's one contribution that lists bartender, and that gentleman is from New York.
All right, other questions in the room? All right, I've got one for you, Chris.
Sure.
As a restaurant meals for, way too long. I resent that the price that's in the menu is actually a deception. It does not include the, 20% plus or minus tip that that goes to the server. I resent that I am subsidizing the owner rather than buying a service from the owner and the staff. I'm subsidizing their wage bill, and I resent that. One reason for me to vote yes on this is to clarify that tip is for extra service above and beyond. I expect to be served properly with clean utensils and clean table and good quality food and, cheerful service. When in Italy a few years ago, the custom there is to tip only a little bit because these are well-paid professionals who are serving me. I want that status here in the States. These should be well-paid professionals who are serving me as part of their work. I don't want to have to subsidize the wage bill. Comment?
I'd say that no matter how it's divided up, by going to a restaurant, you are subsidizing the wages one way or another. The question is, how would you break it up? And if we are truly looking to help servers and bartenders, like the proponents of this ballot question are saying they're doing, then they would have done at least a modicum of outreach to servers and bartenders to ask them if they wanted this change. And servers and bartenders are not asking for it.
Okay. All right, fair enough. And with that, I think we'll end the session. James, Chris, really appreciate it. Anybody who's left on the call, especially your audience members from far away, Shrewsbury and Westboro, appreciate your participation. But that's it. Hope it was informative. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.